educational ramble on the topic of wheelchairs. This time around, I would like to share 9 things that wheelchair users would rather not hear. Of course, I do not speak for every wheelchair user, and there may be some differing opinions on the subject. But in general, these particular phrases I've noticed are both frequently repeated and kind of grating to people who are disabled and use wheelchairs as a mobility aid. So, I'm going to list these things in order of intensity, I suppose, from least harmful and sometimes even fine, and all the way down to just plain malicious. So, let's get started. If you would like to hear about how I became a part-time wheelchair user, I'll leave a link to that video in the description. The first category that I will be discussing is called context is important. So, in this case, these things are not necessarily bothersome or offensive, but in certain contexts, they can be kind of strange. So, the first one is, you are so inspirational. That is a very well-intentioned phrase, and sometimes it is appropriate. Like if somebody has accomplished something major, if somebody has done something very difficult and gone to the other side of it. However, things like running errands or just living your day-to-day life, it feels kind of weird to have that be called inspirational. For example, if somebody worked really hard to complete a 10K and they were trying at that for a really long time, then that's an appropriate time to say that they've done something inspirational. But if that same person mows their lawn, that's not very inspirational. And I think you should try to apply that rule to people with and without disabilities alike. And the second thing in the context is important category is, you are so adorable. Now, of course, this is nice to hear when a person is trying to be adorable. For example, I would say that I have tried to make myself adorable for this video. But, again, wheelchair users tend to hear this phrase in places where it's kind of weird and inappropriate. Like, just like a person just existing in a wheelchair, like trying to be a public figure or anything, they probably don't want to hear about how adorable you think they are. And, like, especially it can be kind of, infantilizing. So, it's just in general, unless the person is going out of their way to be cute, maybe don't say that they're so adorable. Number 3, in context is important, is I hope you get better soon. This is a good thing to say to someone wearing a cast, or someone who you know is just injured and will heal and get better. However, a lot of people in wheelchairs don't know if they will ever get better, or if they will ever have the opportunity to be out of their wheelchair. And some people know that they will not ever have that opportunity. And that can be really frustrating and sometimes kind of saddening. And so that's another well-intentioned phrase that's best to avoid if you're not certain about the situation with the person you're talking to. The second category is called highly questionable, because these things are rarely appropriate to ask instead of sometimes. The first one is, what's wrong with your legs? Even to a person who uses a wheelchair because of limb dysfunction, this is kind of just an insulting and disrespectful question, because there's nothing wrong with disabled people. They are different from how other people operate, and that's not really a defect, especially when you have mobility aids to work around your problems. And so it's also kind of it's not a great question to ask, because there are so many wheelchair users who use wheelchairs for reasons other than having issues with their legs. For me, for example, I use it because I have issues with fainting. Some people use wheelchairs because they have issues with hypermobility. Some people use it because they have issues with pain in other parts of their body that's triggered by walking and being upright. There are all kinds of reasons that people might use a wheelchair that really doesn't have anything to do with their legs. And this, along with other questions directly relating to medical history, just aren't great to ask strangers, because that's just kind of invasive. I mean, think about it. If somebody came up to you and asked you to detail the last reason you went to a doctor, would you be comfortable sharing that? The next item in the highly questionable category is, I have an essential oil or tea or crystal or magic bean that will make you all better. It's fine. It's absolutely fine if you believe in those things for yourself. And if you feel like those things help you, then that's great. But especially if you're not a disabled person, you need to keep in mind that people who are chronically ill and people who are disabled pretty much tend to throw everything but the kitchen sink at trying to treat their illness. Um, it's really kind of upsetting when somebody comes along and says, everything your doctor told you is nonsense, and actually my multi-level marketing company is going to make you healthy. I think there is often an element of greed to these kinds of requests. Like they would often be getting something monetary from me out of it if I went along with it. And it's just generally a really lousy and exploitative thing to do. And especially to people who are desperate, who probably really won't be helped by things that aren't medical cures. The next highly questionable item is, how do you do it? This is an appropriate question to ask if you are immediately about to get with a person who this information would be relevant directly to you at the moment. Otherwise, just don't. Moving on. The last category that I have is just plain harmful. And the first one of that is, you would be a lot better off without that thing. This is not something that you should be saying if you are not a doctor. And especially if you are not currently that person's physician. Because otherwise it is really none of your business, and you really have no accurate perspective as to whether that mobility aid is actually helpful or harmful to them. And it's really harmful to assume. And people who use wheelchairs face enough resistance not to use them as they are. And this is really just not useful advice in most circumstances. The next one that is just plain harmful is, I don't think I could live like that. First of all, yes, you could. It happens to a lot of us. One day you wake up healthy and the next day you wake up disabled. It happens. It's just a reality of life, and when it happens, you need to learn to live with it. And I insist, if something happened to you tomorrow that made you unable to use a part of your body, or made something in your life a lot more difficult to go through with, you would overcome and adapt, because that's what humans do. Practically nobody just lays down and totally gives up when they become disabled. You learn to live with it, and implying that you think you couldn't kind of is just a euphemistic version of what I have to say for my final point. And I have to give a trigger warning for suicidality in this final one. The final and most overtly harmful thing that wheelchair users would rather not hear is, I would kill myself if I was in your position. This is really rarely said with any good intentions. More often than not, it's kind of baiting. And they're just trying to get you to feel bad and to feel despairing. But like every now and again, somebody says that because they like as like a super exaggerated exclamation of how brave they think you are. But that's just it's a really terrible thing to say. And I certainly hope that it isn't true, because that's just a terrible thing to even think about. And it's really terrible and cruel to imply that being disabled or using a wheelchair would be a valid reason to take your own life, because it absolutely isn't. There are so many ways to get around obstacles and to get around challenges. There are so many modern adaptations, and even without those things, the support of your community goes an incredibly long way. And I guess the moral of the story is using a wheelchair is not a horrible or sad or tragic thing, and you could do it too if you had to. I promise. It's not that hard. Okay. Well, I thank you for listening to this preachier than usual rambling video. And I hope I was able to give you some new perspective that you hadn't previously thought about. Or if you do use a wheelchair, I hope I was able to be relatable. So, with that, I sincerely hope that you have